Dalibor, you presented earlier today about the digital revolution. I think there were 4 points you were making to the conference. Can you take us through those?
Sure. So basically, we're talking about digital revolution and an impact on the telecom industry and the TMT industry in general. The first point is about what is actually changing. And we believe that lots of things will change, from the way that the networks are owned and operated to the way that the service is actually consumed by the customer. The second point is what the industry needs to think about, what the regulators and the general community needs to think about, how the industry is structured, what may change in the regulation, and so on. The third point is specifically about what policies may need to be amended and how the policies may need to be amended in order to support the digital economy and support the internet or broadband networks rollouts. And the fourth point is something that we've done some work on in the past, is on the infrastructure light, or if you want, infrastructure separated business models in telecoms, and what has been happening around the world in the past 24 months or 18 months, which is quite significant developments that we're talking about.
Yeah, tell me a bit more about infrastructure light. I've not heard of that before.
Well, we discussed it in our notes, which is called Rebirth of Telecom Monopoly, in November 2014. Since then, we've seen major development. As I said, more than 40% of the towers around the world are now outside the telecom companies in specialized tower companies. We've seen, apart from the New Zealand situation, which is well known, we saw a full structural separation, first in the world, including fixed and mobile, and then the voluntary basis of O2 Czech Republic. But we see a number of other companies, whether it's Telefonica, which is now talking about splitting some assets in Western Europe. We're talking Ofcom looking at the situation in the UK. We saw the Mexican regulator essentially auctioning 700 megahertz spectrum with the assumption of an open network. We saw the US operators, some of them considering service-focused strategies of de-emphasizing the infrastructure. We saw that debate in Turkey. So there's really lots of developments. China, I shouldn't forget as well, that essentially separated all their towers and is thinking about other infrastructure. So that's a global trend in our view, and there'll be more developments and more news in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. Another point you made was about regulatory issues, because they're very important as well. You know, what's your view on how regulatory issues need to perhaps change to meet the market demands?
Yeah, so the essence of the regulation, in our view, is looking at potential failures of competition, because since the liberalization of the telecom markets in the 80s and 90s, competition has been the crucial policy across all the infrastructure and services and spectrum and essentially all the asset classes. So the question is where competition works and where it may not work and why. And the second thing is opening of the networks, or universally, if you want, open access. Now, I think both policies have been in place. Competition has worked in some areas more than in other areas, and I think there are certain issues in certain infrastructure where competition seems to be failing. And in terms of the openness of the networks, I think the main policy that has so far been in place is net neutrality. Now, both concepts, the full competition and net neutrality, in the way that was introduced in the 80s and 90s, may now be reviewed or is being discussed in different occasions in the industry. And we believe that there are certain opportunities for the regulators to revisit these issues. That doesn't mean stop net neutrality or stop network openness, but it could mean open the networks at the lower layers, let's say the basic infrastructure, rather than only focusing on the ISP layer. By that, we can get the benefit of sharing infrastructure, but we can also, and as a consequence of that, we could encourage more service competition. And I think what's important is that the service competition in the future is going to be far more interesting than in the past, because in the Internet of Things environment, the types of services that or products that need connectivity, the range is going to be far wider.
Yes, it's going to make a big impact, isn't it, in IoT?
I think it's going to change everything, and it's important that both the shareholders of the operators and the operators themselves work with the regulators on what we call symbiotic solutions, when returns can be made on the investment in the operators, but at the same time the opportunity to grow the digital economy is maximized as well.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.